Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. It is 12 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started right now. Thanks, everybody that's able to join live. If you're not able to join live, or if you got to step out early, we are going to be doing a replay of today's webinar that'll be going out in the next couple of days here. So keep an eye out for that. But I appreciate everybody who is here today. We were thinking through a list of, what to talk about on these webinars. And, we looked at all the topics that people love to talk about, whether it's how to plan for retirement or save for kids' college or, how to handle the stock market, all stuff that people love to talk about. And we said, forget all that. Let's talk about something that people hate to talk about. And that is budgeting. And all jokes aside, I think budgeting really has gotten quite a bit of a negative, kind of a negative vibe over the last couple of years here. It's a really negative word. I think people use it, right? If you go out in the street and you ask somebody what a budget is, usually it's I gotta go on a budget, or I have to spend less money. And it's something that I think just gets a lot of a bad rap. And I'm kind of a self-proclaimed budget nerd. My wife will certainly tell you that. So I'm a little biased here, but I absolutely love budgeting. I've been doing it for over a decade consistently. And, I don't have everything right, but that's my goal today, is to share some of the things that I've learned over this last years of what to do and what to avoid doing to have a successful budget. And that's really my goal today. So I'm going to throw, before we get started here, I'm going to throw a little poll in the chat here, just to see where everybody is at, whether you've tried budgeting before, whether you've done a budget successfully, maybe you tried it, it didn't work out, maybe you've never done a budget. I'd love to just get an idea where people are at with this. Because that's my goal today, is to help wherever you're at in your budgeting journey. I think I've got some actionable advice for you on where to go from here. Just before while you guys are doing that, just got to show a couple of legal disclosures on the screen here, all fun stuff. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephen Fronrath. I am one of the wealth advisors here at Kennedy Financial Group. Before I was a wealth advisor, I had graduated high school and got my first real job out of high school at Apple, and thought I had it all figured out with money. Kind of spent every dollar that I made. I bought a new car, had a big old car payment. Of course, because I worked at Apple, I had to always buy the latest iPhone or Mac or iPad. And really, it was just kind of chasing the next dollar to buy whatever the latest and greatest was. And I really wasn't super intentional with my money. And I lived at home with my parents, and the idea of becoming debt-free and owning my own house, it kind of felt a little bit out of reach at that point. And my parents in the past had always listened to Dave Ramsey and were really big fans of him. And, I rediscovered Dave in college, listening to his podcast, and yet something about his baby steps and what he had to say just really got me fired up with money and motivated me to go out and hire my own advisor at the age of 19. That advisor happened to be Brandon Kennedy, the founder and president here at Kennedy Financial Group. But Brandon helped me get my act in order, put a plan together for my investments and savings. And, I never really looked back. I paid off the car in less than 9 months, got my savings rate up to over 50%, started maxing out a Roth IRA before the age of 20. And, I think part of that, I made a ton of mistakes along the way. But one of the things that I find instrumental to helping make that turnaround for me was doing a budget. And that's really what motivated me today to talk through this, to help everybody out wherever they are in their journey with budgeting. For those of you who don't know us here at Kennedy Financial Group, we're an independent wealth management firm based in Troy, Michigan. There's 7 of us here at our office here in Troy. Actually, technically, there's 6 of us. Lauren is remote in Louisville, Kentucky. We serve over 400 families, small businesses, and company 401k plans, both locally here in Metro Detroit and across the country. We are actually part of Dave Ramsey's SmartVestor Pro network. That's how I found Brandon in the first place over a decade ago. But it's something, we really believe in those teachings and principles. They're simple principles, but they're effective and they work. And that's really why we love them so much. And we are independent advisors with LPL. So we're not tied to any particular product or fund family. Really, our job is to do what is best for our clients and truly be an independent fiduciary. So part of Kennedy Financial Group, we have core values as a firm. And one of those core values is to act with purpose. And for me, as we were getting ready for today's webinar, this was one of those that really stuck out to me as super important and so relevant when it comes to budgeting. Because really, that's all a budget is acting with purpose with your money month in and month out. And so that's what I'm excited to dig into this afternoon. I appreciate everybody filling out the survey. So it looks like the majority of people, which not super surprising to me, kind of almost half the people fell into the camp of, I've sort of budgeted. I try to look at my expenses regularly, but I'm not actively planning for the future. And I think that's honestly, that lines up with most people that I talk to is they've got a general idea of where they stand, but they're not regularly looking out and forward in their budget. And today, hopefully we can talk through some different tactics and things that you can use in a real practical way to help you make the most of your budget and stick with it. So with that in mind, what we are going to plan on going through today, we're going to talk through what a budget is, what it isn't. There's a whole bunch of myths surrounding budgeting that we're going to debunk. And then we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how to actually budget in practice. I want to give you real tips and tactics of how to actually stick with a budget over the long term. Part of that, I'm going to show you some of my personal favorite tools that I've used over the years and that I've seen other families have success with. We'll even dig a little bit into my family's budget as well, show you some real world examples of how I've done budgeting over the years. And certainly throughout today's webinar, if you've got questions, feel free to use the question and answer function of the webinar here. You can also text us as well. I think that number was up on the screen here, but I'll throw it up once again. It's 248-528-0485. Again, it's 248-528-0485. But feel free to use the Q&A section of the chat. If you've got questions throughout the presentation today, I'm going to make sure that we talk through them whenever they come up. Lauren's going to be helping, making sure that we get all those questions answered because I want it to be super valuable for everybody today. And then the last part is I want to leave everybody with a next step action plan of some simple but actionable things that you can do at the end of the webinar today to help make progress towards your goals. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and dig in to what is a budget in the first place, why does it matter, and why do we care? And going back to what I said earlier, budgeting has really gotten this negative rap over the past few years of this negative thing of, it's this negative, restrictive punishment of I can't spend money and I've got to reduce what I'm spending on fun stuff and have it be all boring and just really negative. And honestly, that could not be further from the truth. Truly, at the end of the day, all a budget is it's the difference between us being proactive with our money at the start of every single month, giving every dollar a job to do, creating a plan and sticking with it, rather than doing nothing at all, winging it, hoping for the best when the month starts, and just seeing where we end up at the end of the month. And hope is not a strategy. And really, that's all a budget is it's just being proactive with our money, right? If your take-home pay every single month is $4,000 a month, having a budget doesn't change how much money you do or don't have to spend. You're still going to have $4,000 at the beginning of the month. Really, a budget just gives us the framework of how do we make the most of that $4,000 each month. So there's a lot of myths out there, but like most myths, they all start out with some little semblance of truth. But the one that I hear all the time, which this is honestly, I've gotten frustrated with this in the past. I know lots of other people get frustrated with this is, okay, I made my plan, I made my budget at the start of the month, but I'm 5 days in, 10 days into the month, something already came up, it destroyed my budget, ruined my entire plan, it didn't go to plan, and now I feel like I've wasted my time. And I think that's a valid point because it's frustrating when something comes in and wrecks our plans, whether it's a budget or whether it's just we plan to go camping this weekend and it's raining. So we need to roll with the punches and just handle that as it comes through. But honestly, I really like this quote from Dwight Eisenhower, the fact that plans are absolutely useless, but the process of planning is everything. And that's so true with budgeting, because I would much rather us shoot for 100% accuracy. And I promise you, even myself, after doing this consistently for over a decade, the start of my month and the end of my month always look completely different, because stuff happens that we can't foresee. We can't predict the future. But really, all a budget is about, as long as we're intentional with that plan, I'd much rather us get 70 or 80% accuracy with our plan and hit 70 or 80% of our goals versus just wing it without a plan and get nowhere near there. The other myth that I see all the time, and I see a couple of them in the chat already. I've got a couple of real estate friends that are real estate agents, and always it comes with the question of, hey, budgeting is easy if you get paid every 2 weeks, consistently, same dollar amount every single time. Or my folks that are in retail that work variable hours. People always think that you can't do a budget if you don't have a regular income. And there is a little bit of truth to that. Is it harder to do a budget when you don't have consistent paychecks coming in every single month? Certainly, right? There's a lot more predictability in a regular paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. But there's different tactics, and we'll share one of the templates that we have for a budget that helps you plan on an irregular income. But there are different tactics and ways that we can utilize a budget for to help us plan around this, even if our income isn't super regular throughout the year. The other myth that I hear all the time is that budgeting is for broke people and people that don't have any money. And again, there is a little bit of truth in the fact that the less money that you have to work with every single month, the greater impact doing a budget is going to have on your day-to-day situation, right? If you've got $2,000 a month of take-home income to work with, implementing a budget and being really intentional with those dollars are going to help you get the most out of that $2,000, and it's going to have a much greater impact than somebody making $500,000 a year, comfortably covering all of their needs and all their monthly expenses, who just is unintentional with the money and spends the rest at the end of the month. But on the flip side there, again, I see folks that people that make more than $500,000 a year in income saving less every single month than families that I have that make less than $100,000 a year. And it all comes down to being intentional with our dollars. Because if we're not intentional at the beginning of the month, whatever plan that we had for it goes out the window, and that money will get spent over time. Maybe not immediately, but if we're not intentional with it, even if we make a ton of money, that money is still going to go out the door at some point to something you probably didn't plan for it to go to. The last myth that I hear all the time, and honestly, this is probably the most common one and more so an objection that I hear to why somebody doesn't want to budget, is that it takes too much time. And again, like most of these myths, there is some truth to this, because I won't sugarcoat it. If this is the first time that you're really doing a budget in earnest and really trying to be intentional with your money for the first time, it is going to take time and it's going to take effort. Everybody's always looking for the budget hack or the quickest, easiest way to budget. And there's just not. If we want to be intentional with our money, we have to make the time to be intentional with that budget and to do it every single month, right? Just like the Nike slogan, you just got to do it. And that's not an easy answer to give, but it's the truth, especially as we get started. But just like anything in life, the more that we do something, the easier it's going to be over time, and the less time it's going to take, the more that we do it. Again, I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I spend about an hour a month on the budget, maintaining it, keeping it up to date, and planning for the future. So it does take time in the beginning, but it gets better as the more you do it. So how do we actually budget, right? It's good to talk in theory of what a budget is and all that stuff, but we need to work on how do we actually create this budget. And the first step in that is we have to have some type of framework to build our budget around, right? Some rules for this. So we have what we call the 4 rules of budgeting. And the first rule being, we need to give every single dollar a job. Just like I mentioned earlier about how all a budget was being intentional with your money, giving it a plan to do, and then following that plan through the month. That's all it is for rule number 1. You are the person in charge of your money. And again, the budget doesn't need to be restrictive, especially as car prices have gone up over the last couple of years. I've gotten asked the question a lot of, hey, should I be leasing a car, or should I buy a new car, or do I need to stick with my beater that I have right now? And it's a really good question. We're in the market for a new car ourselves as well, and things are expensive. But I've got some families that they really value driving newer vehicles, and they just love that. That's something that they really enjoy doing, is owning newer cars. And that's completely okay. So those families, they prioritize spending more money on those vehicles, and they spend less in other areas that aren't as important to them as the vehicles. So they might spend less every single month going out to eat. They might eat in more. They might spend less on travel and vacations. And that's okay as long as we're intentional with our money. You are the boss of your money, so you just tell it what's important to you, and we prioritize the things that we want to spend more money and more time doing, and we deprioritize the things that just aren't as important to us. The second rule is embracing what we call our true expenses. Now, I want you to take a moment and just kind of imagine what your monthly budget could or would look like, and think through some of the expenses that you have. Probably some of the first expenses that come to mind are the obvious ones, right? Maybe that's a mortgage payment. Maybe that's the Comcast bill. Maybe that's Netflix, especially Netflix, as it just keeps going up and up and up. But there's these regular purchases that happen consistently every single month that we can think about. And it's really good. We need to get a handle on those. But our true expenses are the ones that they happen regularly, but not monthly. And they're the expenses that can truly wreak havoc on our financial life if we're not thinking about them. So a great example of that are Christmas gifts. For most of us, I know myself included, before I started doing this, we'd start to have a great Christmas season, go into the new year. January would roll around, then February, then March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. We'd get to December 1st. We'd look at our list of who we're buying gifts for, say that we want to spend $600 for those people. And now I realize, oh crap, I've got to spend $600 this month, but I don't have $600, or I didn't account for that. But we knew that Christmas was coming all along. So that's what true expenses are these expenses that happen regularly throughout the year, but just not monthly. So what we just need to do is set aside something, like say if we want to spend $600 a year on Christmas gifts, let's put that target in there that we need that by December. And we're going to create ourselves a monthly bill of $50 a month that we just pay ourselves each month for these Christmas gifts. And that way, once December rolls around, we've got $600 allocated in our account for Christmas gifts, and we can stress less about not having the money and spend more of that time and effort on picking out the gifts and just enjoying the holidays overall. The third rule is that we need to roll with the punches with our budget. So if you've ever been boxing, the first thing that they teach you is that when you get hit by your opponent, you want to move your body in the direction that your opponent's punch is going to help lessen the blow. And the same thing is true with our money and our budget. Because like I mentioned earlier, I think one of the reasons that people get frustrated with doing a budget is they put a plan together, halfway through the month goes by, something comes up, completely blows up their plan, then they beat themselves up and get frustrated and then give up on the budget and say it didn't work. And newsflash, nobody can predict the future. Not you, not me, not anybody. So we wouldn't know that those things happen. So rolling with the punches just means that dealing with whatever life may throw at us. Back in February of this year, my wife and I, our house is early 70s build. So it had original windows, original insulation. So this past winter, we decided, hey, let's go ahead and upgrade the insulation on the house. And that was not a cheap project by any means. So we paid that bill second week of February. The very next week, I was driving into the office here and my check engine light came on the car and the car overheated and it cost me $1,100 to repair it at the auto shop. That sucked. I hated that. I was so frustrated. I didn't want to spend the money on that, but it was a frustrating experience, but it wasn't sending us into a financial tailspin. Because what we did is we rolled with the punches and we looked at our budget and said, okay, hey, we've got an $1,100 expense here. Where can that come from? So we borrowed from some other categories like our travel fund to help pay for this. And I didn't really want to do that, but I much rather be in that position rather than having to borrow money on a credit card if we can avoid it. And really rolling with the punches is what we need to do and just not beat ourselves up when life throws us curveballs. The final rule is what we call aging our money, which if you've ever lived paycheck to paycheck or are currently living paycheck to paycheck, you know how incredibly stressful it can be when you have bills due, but you're waiting for the paycheck to come on Friday. And what aging our money is all about is increasing that buffer between our income and our expenses. So in practice, what this looks like is being really purposeful with our spending, consistently spending less than we earn. And ideally, right, we're in the month of July right now. Ideally, if we age our money, we want to be spending last month's income that we earned on this month's bills. And that way we always have at least 30 days buffer between when the money comes in and when it goes out. Because if we have at least 30-day buffer, we never have to worry about when payday is coming, if something gets delayed, if there's an additional expense, we've got that margin between us and life. And this is not going to happen overnight, but if we consistently be intentional with our money, spend less than what we earn every single month, this age of money will naturally rise over time. So now that we have a framework for how to build that budget, we need to talk about there are two types of budgeting. The first one being tracking, and the second one being planning. Now, I see this a lot where people tell me, hey, I did a budget, and that's great. But usually what I find is people are doing the tracking portion, which the tracking portion looks a lot like, hey, I downloaded an app like mint.com or some other website that aggregates all of my accounts and shows me, hey, last month I spent $462 for groceries, which is super important information to know. We need to have a baseline of what we're spending, but just tracking our expenses is only half of the equation. That's looking in the rearview mirror at what's already happened, but we're neglecting the planning portion of it. So we'll get to planning in a second, but this is the first place that I would start if you are doing your budget, is you have to know your numbers first. So what do we need to do? I would recommend downloading an app like mint.com is one of those. You can go on your bank's website if you want to do that, pull up your credit card. It's a little more tedious if you don't want to connect your different accounts to an app like Mint, but you'll want to look back at the last 12 months worth of your spending and look for monthly trends, right? This is where you're going to be able to spot the regular bills like rent, mortgage payment, student loan payment, car payment, groceries, cable bill, all these regular expenses that happen every single month. And right, things like the electrical bill. Obviously, that's probably going to be higher in the summer with air conditioning than it is in the winter for most people. But if you look at the last 12 months, you can average that out to see, hey, maybe the average is around $60 a month for this, or whatever the dollar amount is. And now you've got your baseline. So we want to get our baseline for our regular monthly expenses, but then we want to look for those bigger one-off or recurring expenses, those true expenses that we talked about earlier for Rule 2, right? Things like your car insurance payments, things like birthday gifts, Christmas gifts. Heck, one of them that I forgot the other day, not other day, but the other month, were Mother's Day and Father's Day gifts. Those come up every single year. We spend a consistent amount of money every single year. So why not be prepared for those? So what we did is all those average expenses that happen, those bigger one-off or recurring expenses that don't happen monthly, we just divided those up over the course of 12 months. And now we've got our average monthly spend between those regular monthly expenses and those bigger one-off recurring expenses throughout the year. So say, for example, you have a take-home pay of $4,000 a month, and you add all these up, and let's say it comes out to $2,800 a month of recurring ongoing expenses between monthly and these one-off expenses. That's great. We've got our baseline now. And now we move into the planning phase. And this part is super critical because we can't predict the future, but we can look out over the next 12 to 18 months to see what's coming up. So we want to start with that data that we collected from the tracking, our baseline number. From there, we're going to plug in those monthly expenses and then those recurring expenses that we have, right, to get to that $2,800 a month of average spend that we talked about earlier. And again, we're going to look out over these next 12 to 24 months. And I like looking out over the next 2 years to see if we can spot any bigger expenses that might be coming up. This could be things like, your sister is getting married later this year, and you are going to be maid of honor at the wedding, and there's going to be more expenses related to that. Maybe it's out of state and you've got to travel. Maybe there's a vacation that you want to go on. Maybe there's a new car that you want to buy. You're having a baby. All sorts of things that could come up over the next 1 to 2 years. Let's get ahead of those and turn those bigger expenses into a monthly bill. Right? If we're planning on going to, Italy in, call it 2 years time, and we think that's going to cost us $4,800 to go to Italy, let's break that down into a monthly expense over these next 2 years. And that's a $200 bill that we can pay ourselves every single month into our budget. And when Italy rolls around in 2 years time, we're not going to have to stress about it. It's just going to be there when we need it the most. So tracking and planning is the first place that we start to get our numbers. And again, we want to give every dollar a job. So if we have a take-home pay of $4,000 a month, and we've already allocated the $2,800 for the regular recurring and monthly expenses, we need to still find a home for that extra $1,800 a month of extra income. So allocate that towards your goals, right? Whether it's vacation or savings or investings or paying off debt, make sure that you have a job to give each of those dollars. But actually in practice, great. We've got numbers, we've got our baseline here. How do we actually track this? And this is, again, this is another question that I get all the time is, what is the best tool or app or spreadsheet or whatever to use to do my budget? And honestly, my answer for most people is it depends. That's the typical financial advisor answer is it depends. But truly, it does because you know yourself better than anybody. So if you're more technically inclined, doing a budget on paper and pencil is probably going to frustrate you to all get out. On the flip side, if you don't really like technology and that's not really your thing, me telling you to go download an app isn't super helpful. So for me, the biggest one is the tool that you think that you're going to stick with, and that's going to be easiest for you to pick up. And that really, at the end of the day, that's what it is. I've got 3 favorite tools of my own. I don't use all three of those personally, but I've seen success for families that have tried each of these three methods. The first one being the simplest, which is truly paper and pencil or pen if you're feeling really confident. But we had this monthly cash flow plan, and you can scan the QR code here to download it. We also are going to send out in that replay email a link to download this from the website as well. But really, it's very simple. You print this out, and at the very top of the page, you input your monthly take-home pay, and there are different boxes and categories that you can put your money in of what you plan to spend in those every single month. There's two columns. There's a planned column of what you think you're going to spend. And then throughout the month, you're going to keep track of what you spend, and you're going to add that up and total that up throughout the month, and you're going to wind up with how much you spent at the end of the month. So it's a really simple way to get started. If you've never done this before, you just want to get everything out of your head and onto paper, this is a really great place to start. I've got a lot of folks that love Excel or Google Sheets, and that's where they do their budget right now. There's a lot of templates out there online. Again, this template right here. Again, use the QR code to download it. But this template right here is pretty much the same version as that paper and pencil template that I just showed. And it's a really simple way to get started. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with all the different templates out there or just not sure where to start, this is a good place to get all of those thoughts and categories out of your head. I would say the upside to both of these tools, tool number one and tool number two, is that they're really easy to get started with. The downside is that they're hard to maintain over time, especially if you're keeping track of all your different transactions, right? Maybe you've got money coming out of your checking account, your savings account, one or two credit cards. Maybe you've got a mortgage payment. Maybe you've got a student loan payment. There is a lot of accounts to keep track of. And that's typically where I see people fall off the wagon with these first two tools, is when things get complicated and moving parts get added and you're trying to track expenses, it's hard to keep up with these two tools. So that's why I like, it's called You Need a Budget, which is a budgeting app for both your computer on the web and an app on your phone. But I've been using this tool for over 10 years personally. It's been really the thing that I think I've used the most over this last decade to help me get control of my money. But it's really great because you can connect all your different financial accounts to it. You can plug in all of your different categories that you have, whether it's groceries, student loan payments, your subscriptions that you have, your Amazon Prime bill from yesterday and today that you're going to spend a bunch of money on. You can put those categories in there. And the beautiful part is that this app will learn over time the more that you use it. So for example, I've got a groceries category in my budget, and it's connected to my bank and credit cards. So when I swipe my card at Meijer on Sunday for groceries, that expense is going to show up a couple of days later in You Need a Budget, or YNAB for short. It's going to show up in YNAB, and it's going to show up under the category of groceries because the app has learned over time this is where that money goes. And so for me, I really love this because it allows me to take some time away every single month to not have to track all these different transactions and enter it manually. But it also allows me to plan for the future. I've used YNAB to save for my wife's engagement ring, to plan our wedding, to plan our honeymoon, to buy our house. This app can really help you with a ton of different things. No, I don't get paid by YNAB. It sure sounds like I do because I love it a lot, but it's really just helped me a ton, and I'm a big fan of it. So you can download it. You can check it out, this QR code link here. But that's a really good resource. I know Every Dollar, which is also another budgeting app created by Dave Ramsey and his team, similar to YNAB. Again, different solution depending on your need. Very similar there, but everybody's got their own personal preference. So those are the different tools that I have. Let me see here. It looks like we might have a question. So Dawn asked, how much does YNAB cost a month? There's a free trial, but wonder what the ongoing expense is. I believe, Dawn, I think YNAB cost about $99 a year. So it's not cheap. I think it's about the same as Every Dollar. So call it $8 a month. Honestly, though, I was a little frustrated as they raised their prices over the years, just because nobody likes when things go up in cost, but it's been one of the best expenses, and it's paid for itself over the years for me. But I think it's come out to a little over $8 a month for YNAB. So those are some of the tools that I use. If we've got a little bit of time here, and certainly if you've got questions, feel free to throw them out there. I want to make sure that we make this valuable for everybody, but I'm going to give everybody just maybe next 10 minutes or so, just a deep dive into my personal budget here, just to give you an idea of what does this look like in practice. And again, by all means, I don't have everything figured out. I still make mistakes every single month, but hopefully this is a good starting place for everybody to see. But as I mentioned, I use an app called You Need a Budget, or YNAB, and it might be, I got to refresh it here. The beauty of doing things live. But this is our budget right here, and it might be a little difficult to see. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. But on the side here, you connect all of your different accounts, whether it's checking, savings account, you can connect your credit cards here. But effectively, you're going to give a total, so call it 66 grand here, of expenses and money that we need to give jobs to. So that's over there on the left-hand side. But on the middle section here, we've got all of these categories down the middle. And you can see I've got all sorts of categories between giving and investing. There's vacations and travel and housing. And think of all of these as buckets for your money. So we can have certain categories depending on the goals that we have. And YNAB makes it super easy to track those and set goals for that. So let's say this is for the month of August. So I'm planning out a little bit here. But let's look at Christmas gifts. So you can see here for Christmas gifts, I've got $598 assigned to Christmas gifts right now. Let's just say that my goal for Christmas gifts, I want to spend $1,100 this year on Christmas gifts. I can select that category and create what we call a target. And I can go in here and say, I need $1,100. I need it once a year, and I need it by, let's call it December 1st of each year. And I'm going to save that target. And now you can see it automatically tells me that I need $220 a month to fund between now and December 1st for me to have $1,100 to spend for Christmas come the start of the holiday season. And this is your true expense. And it makes it super easy to say, hey, we're behind on this. And you can even see it shows you right there in the categories that we need $220 this month. So how that actually works in practice is, let's pretend that we just get paid. So let's use that example that I used earlier, that your take-home pay is $4,000 a month. Let's say as you get paid bi-weekly, and these transactions here, they automatically pop up here if you have the accounts connected. So you don't typically have to do this manually. But let's just say here is it's coming from your employer, and it'll show up under ready to assign, meaning that you've got new income here, and you can give it a name if you want, but you don't have to. But let's just say I've got an inflow of $2,000 from one of those paychecks. If I go back to my budget, you can see at the top of the screen here, I now have $2,000 ready to assign for the month of August. And now I can go down my list in my budget and assign money for this. So I can go in here and say, you know what, those Christmas gifts, I need $220. I can select that category. And then down here on the right-hand side, you can see it says underfunded $220. So if I click that dollar amount, it's going to move $220 from the top of my screen, at the top of that, the $2,000 paycheck. It's going to move $220 of that for my Christmas gifts. Now, I don't have all the time in the world to go through every single line item, but you can do this for every aspect of your budget. Whether it's these true expenses, right? These larger one-off expenses like Christmas gifts, or I do the same thing for car insurance. But you could do the same thing for, monthly expenses as well. One that I really love in here is you can connect this to your mortgage. So if I click over on the mortgage here, I can create a target and say, our mortgage payment is $741.68 a month. We've got escrow separated, so we do pay taxes and insurance, so it is more than that, but we can put this in here and it'll tell me I need to save $741 a month for the mortgage. But what I really like about YNAB is one of the common questions that we get when we work with families is, I've got a 30-year mortgage. I don't want to pay on that mortgage for 30 years. How do I pay it off sooner? And YNAB is really cool because it has this payoff simulator. So I can go in here and see, okay, if I pay $741.68 every single month, it's going to have it paid off in about 28 years. But what if I pay, $1,500 a month? Now I can see, that pays it off 16 years faster, saving me $46,000 in interest. And now it's paid off by July of 2034 in just a little over 10 years. So this is not necessarily the point of the budgeting app, but it just goes to show, that's why I love this app so much, is because there's a ton in here and it's super helpful to get a handle on your money. A couple of other categories that I wanted to share that might be helpful for everybody. You can see we've got in there, we've got our escrow account is separated from our accounts. We've got property taxes on here. One other that we've got is we've got our vacations funded on here as well. But we have, my wife and I both have these fun money categories, and it sounds dumb, but these are the categories that each of us gets a dollar amount every single month in this account, and no questions asked, right? If I want to go buy, a $300 Lego because I just want to, my wife can't question why I bought that. She can still give me crap for buying it, but we don't have to have a discussion around it. And same thing is true for her. If she wants to go and we want to buy Jonas Brothers tickets come August of this year, we don't have to worry about it if it comes from that. We also have this category called overflow. And overflow, we've got our emergency fund, but we've got this overflow fund. And some people call it miscellaneous, some people call it whatever. But I really like this fund because if we look back from earlier in the discussion, we talked about one of the rules being we want to roll with the punches in our budget. And it's hard to roll with the punches when we don't have the money to cover those expenses. So I like to keep a little bit of an overflow fund for just those expenses that pop up that we didn't foresee. Maybe it was a friend's birthday that involves going out to dinner and spending money on a gift card. Just things that we didn't think about at the beginning of the month that we can easily pull from this overflow fund. Lauren, it looks like somebody's got a question.
Yeah. We were asked, can you use YNAB when you are self-employed? So keeping track of personal expenses and business expenses.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say it's definitely designed for more personal use. I have used it for being self-employed. I guess you can count this. I'm in a band called If Walls Could Talk, and we play pop and rock music, but I actually do our band's budget on YNAB, and it's a separate budget. You can have multiple budgets on the app. You can go in here and you can open different budgets. Yep, you can see it right there is the band budget. But you can connect your business accounts for it there, have a separate, and that's what I recommend if you're going to do it for the business to keep track of business income and expenses, do that separate. And then just pay yourself. If you're going to pay yourself from the business, have that be a separate transaction. But it certainly can handle both business and personal expenses. It's not a QuickBooks, right? So all my all my CPAs out there, they're probably not going to like it if you just use this only for your accounting if you've got a serious business going on. But I think it does the job well for tracking and planning, both from an income standpoint and an expense standpoint for both business and personal. So this is some of the budget right here. Again, that overflow fund is useful for the miscellaneous. We even added for our dog, Jonas, he's our golden retriever, He went to the vet a lot when he was a puppy because he would do dumb stuff like eat balls that had squeakers in them. Probably our fault, but he would go to the vet, and we averaged out what a couple of years worth of vet expenses looked like. And now we know, okay, his monthly vet bill, we need to budget about $80 a month for that vet bill. And we're not going to go to the vet every single month, hopefully. But if we have to go maybe once or twice a year, we've got enough in that account to have it covered. So this is You Need a Budget. Again, I'm not the You Need a Budget expert. They've got an amazing team that does training and classes on their own. So if you want to dig into how the software specifically works, I recommend they've got a 34-day free trial. Sign up for the trial, take advantage. They've got a lot of great resources there. But certainly, I've been using YNAB for over a decade. So if you've got a question on the software, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to talk through whatever's on your mind when it comes to that. And budgeting is such a personal thing to everybody. So there's not typically going to be a generic answer for everybody because it is going to depend on your situation. And that's why we are here. So I'm going to jump back into the rest of our presentation and kind of close this out with what we call our next step action plan. So these are hopefully actionable, simple steps that you can take today to help get you closer to implementing a budget in your life, no matter where you're at in your journey. So the first next step action plan is for somebody that's never done a budget, or maybe you tried in the past, but you fell off the wagon doing it a couple of times. The first thing that I would do is going back to those two types of budgeting that we talked about earlier, the tracking versus planning. And we need to get a handle on what our numbers are before we start the budget. So download an app. Again, mint.com is a great one. They've probably got ads and stuff like that, but it does a good job. Makes it easy to consolidate the accounts and see all of your expenses and spending. You can do it manually if you want to. It's just going to take more time to figure out those trends, but analyze that spending and get your baseline monthly spend, right? Where's our starting point? And then from there, we need to plug those numbers into one of those tools that we talked about, right? Certainly it's not limited to that sheet that we saw or the Excel file or YNAB. Again, use whatever works for you. But I want you to do this consistently. And especially if you've never done a budget before, you have to give it time. So I want you to give it time and don't give up on it easily in the first month. It's going to take a little bit. If you've got a general idea of what your expenses are, which this is most people answer, this is kind of where they fall at the beginning of this webinar. If you've got a general idea of those expenses, but you know that you want to be more intentional and more thoughtful with the planning that goes into your budget, again, pick one of those tools that we talked about, whatever is going to stick with you, but commit to doing 3 months of budgeting. Because if you do it for the first month, you're probably going to run into something, you're going to get frustrated. And honestly, for most people, I see it takes at least 3 months of consistently doing it for it to stick. Now, this doesn't mean that you're only looking at your budget once a month, 3 times. You're probably going to have to look at your budget at least once a week, the first couple of months that you do it, to get a handle on your transactions and your expenses. Like I talked about earlier, if you want this to be successful, you have to put in the time to do it. It's not going to happen automatically, but commit to 3 months of budgeting, because typically I see if you can keep with it for that long, 3 to 4 months, it typically sticks and you're able to see some type of traction with your budget. And the last one would be, if you regularly do a budget, which there is a significant amount of people that actually did do a budget on a regular basis. But if you feel like I've been doing this consistently, I just want to get a little bit better, I want to upgrade my budget a little bit, the first thing that I would always do, and I try and do this personally every single year, typically it's year end around December, beginning of January, but take an audit of all your different categories that you have on your budget. And we use a tactic called keep, kill, and combine for these different categories. So you'll go through and see, hey, this one is still relevant, let's go ahead and keep it. you know, this expense that was out there for something that we funded last year, maybe we redid the front yard landscaping. That was last year. We don't need that sitting out here anymore. We're going to delete that category. And then maybe you look out and see, okay, I was overcomplicating. One that I overcomplicated for the longest time was all of the miscellaneous crap that you get when you go to Costco or Sam's Club, where you might buy toilet paper or paper towel or other non-grocery items. For the longest time, I tried breaking that out in my budget, and I would try and look at the receipt to see which was which. I realized that was taking way too much time, and I just lumped that together with my groceries cost. The monthly groceries number ended up being a little bit higher, but it was a lot less work for me. So that was just an example of combining categories. And then what I would do is I would look out over these next 12, 18, 24 months and see, are there any big expenses that I normally wouldn't budget for that I think I do want to add? Right? Maybe it's something as small as, we try and go, we try and visit our grandkids out of state. And typically when we go there, we spend more money than we want every single month on them. And we just want to be intentional with that. Whatever it is, think through some of those things that maybe you hadn't have thought about in the past that you can be a little bit more proactive on with those expenses. So that was a lot. Budgeting can be overwhelming. Like I said, I think that was one of the biggest objections that I hear from people, is that there's just a lot. It takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of places to start. But hopefully that's helpful to get a start on what are some easy ways to get your budget going, to help you get back on track. Like I mentioned, know that we are here as a resource for you. We are very much here to answer whatever questions that are on your mind. Certainly, if they're money related, if they're investment related, we're here to answer those for you. But if you've got questions on how to implement your budget or how to use a particular tool or software, we're here to be as a guide for you in any of those questions that you have. So we're going to follow up again in the next day or two here. Keep an eye out on your email for a link to the replay of this webinar. It's going to have some of those resources that we talked about in there, some of the templates, some of the worksheets. Feel free, download those, check it out. Certainly reach out to us if you have any additional questions. But thank you so much for joining us today. I've had a great time with everybody. Hopefully that was all valuable, and look forward to seeing everybody here for our next meeting. Hope everybody has a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.